Welcome to the Creating a Community Animal Disaster Plan Toolkit. Hi, I'm Deborah Schnackenberg, Director of Disaster Services at PetAid Colorado, and I'll be your guide for a series of webinars that expand upon the 7 steps of the Creating a Community Animal Disaster Plan that you'll find in the accompanying toolkit. Let's begin with step 1, understanding the emergency response system and its connection to your local community. The introduction to the toolkit asks why plan, and answers that question by noting that saving animals saves human lives. This is not just an anecdotal statement. Both before, during, and after Hurricane Katrina, we've seen examples where people feared that their pets would die if left behind, or were afraid that their pets wouldn't be cared for if they were evacuated. And so they chose to either stay in a dangerous situation or to re enter a dangerous situation in order to ensure the safety of their pets. Not only do these kinds of decisions endanger the safety and the lives of the pet owners, but it also endangers the safety and the lives of the first responders who are then called upon to rescue these individuals in order to save human life. The Federal Pets Act of 2006 formalized the requirement to provide planning for the support of pet evacuation and sheltering in order to answer these needs. However, it's a law that requires expertise to fill. Emergency managers at the local level are generally not animal experts. In order to write and implement effective plans, they need assistance from people who are animal experts, and they need assistance from experts who are community experts. Extension agents are uniquely qualified to assist in both of these areas of expertise. It's a fundamental tenet of disaster response that all disasters are local. Many citizens have a misunderstanding about who is in charge during a disaster event. They think that if the disaster is large enough, that local control will soon pass to the state, who will come in and take over. And that as the magnitude of the disaster grows larger, that FEMA comes in and takes over the management of the disaster. This isn't true. The reality is that unless the disaster is of a catastrophic nature, the local jurisdiction, or jurisdictions if the disaster covers a wide area, always retain authority over the disaster response. The state and then FEMA may be asked to enter into the response to provide resources, coordination, and support, but the authority for disaster response remains with your local authorities. This is the primary reason that local planning is so critical. A disaster in your community will be managed by your local authorities and will only have your local resources to draw upon initially. In order to assure that human safety is planned for, you must also have a local animal disaster plan that meets the needs of your community. If your community doesn't develop a realistic animal plan, no one else will do it for you. A one-size-fits-all animal disaster plan will not meet the unique needs of your community. It will not save animal lives, and it will not save human lives. Only the expertise of your community's animal stakeholders, working in conjunction with local emergency management and the overall emergency response system in your community, can create an animal disaster plan that will do that. But let's step back from the local level just for a moment. This emergency response system that I just mentioned isn't totally different in every jurisdiction. In fact, if you were to visit a county in a Midwestern state and then visit a county in the northeastern part of the United States, you would find emergency response systems that are remarkably similar. This is because across the country, we've adopted a disaster response framework based on the National Incident Management System, or NIMS. Because federal, state, and local jurisdictions all utilize the same framework, use the same incident command structure, and speak the same language in a response, we can eliminate a large amount of confusion and chaos in a disaster. This goes for disaster planning as well. As you work through this toolkit to develop, write, and implement your animal disaster plan, you'll be using the same steps and techniques that are used in developing human disaster planning and the management of communications and resources during a disaster. Using NIMS, we assure that all of these efforts are in alignment from the local, state, and federal levels up and back down again during a disaster event. So what is this local plan I'm referring to? It's most commonly referred to as the Emergency Operations Plan, or EOP. Some municipalities, all counties, and all states have an EOP. It's the EOP that outlines the legal authority for the local jurisdiction or the state to act in a disaster, and it details the roles and responsibilities of everyone in the plan. Unless an individual, a group of individuals, or an agency is recognized and is identified with a specified role in the EOP, they are not part of the formal disaster plan. During a disaster, actions by individuals, groups of individuals, or agencies who are not a part of the overall plan can create complications or additional emergency situations during the disaster, adding to the chaos of an already chaotic event. In the past, well-meaning members of the local community, as well as non-local individuals, have often jumped into the fray during a disaster event to assist with both real and perceived animal needs, only to create real safety issues for citizens, first responders, and the very animals they were trying to help. The purpose of formally developing an animal disaster plan is that a part of the local EOP, in alignment with the entire plan for the community, is to avoid these kinds of unplanned for complications and to save lives in the process. As you develop your animal disaster response plan, you'll see how it ties into the major areas of the EOP, which are warning, public information, evacuation, and sheltering. Your animal plan will need to address how people get information in a pre-disaster period that includes shelter in place or evacuation planning for their household pets and companion livestock. It will need to address what you tell your citizens about the coming event in terms of their animals. As a disaster approaches or is suddenly occurring, your plan will provide the basis for how citizens are supported during their evacuation with their animals, and also for how those animals are sheltered, cared for, and ultimately reunited with their owners. Planning for all of these areas before a disaster occurs is critical to the success of the efforts during the disaster, and as you've now seen, will conform and integrate into your overall community EOP. The integration of your animal disaster plan into the EOP will be in the form of an annex to the EOP. Depending on how your local EOP is structured, this annex may simply be called the Animal Annex, or it may be referred to by other titles, which we'll discuss a bit later. But no matter what is called, your animal plan must be a formal part of the overall EOP in order to be included in the statutory authority and formal roles and responsibilities set forth by the EOP. As you work through each of the steps in the Creating an Animal Disaster Plan Toolkit, you'll see how your animal plan fits into the overall EOP and in its final form because the animal annex to your local emergency operations plan. Developing your plan is only the first step in having a viable and successful animal disaster response. The best plan in the world is no plan at all if after it's written, it simply sits on the shelf. Your plan must also have a way to be implemented in real life when disaster strikes. The way all planning in the EOP, including the Animal Plan or Annex, is implemented in real life is through two critical structures, which are parts of the National Incident Management System that we discussed earlier in this webinar. First is the Incident Management System, or ICS. It is ICS that is in command of the situation on the ground during a disaster. ICS is the structure that provides management, operational response, planning, resource, and supplies logistics, and financial and administrative accountability for the first responders before, during, and after the disaster event. Animal disaster response has its own place in the ICS system under the operations branch. Your animal disaster plan cannot be implemented if you don't plan for the development of the boots on the ground people and equipment who do the actual work. Some type of animal disaster response team that is your operational team during a disaster. These types of teams are commonly called Community Animal Disaster Response Teams, or CARTs. And we'll talk in more detail about CARTs in later steps in the toolkit. You should become very familiar with ICS. Step 1 of your toolkit has web links that will take you to information that will help you learn about and understand ICS. The second structure that is critical to a real-life implementation of your animal plan is the Emergency Operations Center, or the EOC. The EOC is a central location where subject matter experts from a wide range of functional areas in the disaster gather to provide the coordination and expertise needed to assure that the ICS on the ground gets what is needed to successfully protect human life, property, and the environment, and also to assure that information coming in and going out to authorities, elected officials, and the public is accurate and meaningful. In order to organize these needs, the EOC groups these areas of expertise into emergency support functions, or ESFs. For instance, human emergency sheltering is often ESF 6, and search and rescue is often ESF 9. In the majority of EOCs around the country, it is ESF 11 that manages the coordination of animal disaster response in the EOC. However, please be aware that your specific emergency operations plan may call your animal ESF by a different number or letter. Regardless of what it's called, the animal ESF in your EOC requires that your animal response plan identify which individual or which agency is responsible for sitting in the animal ESF in the EOC to assist during a disaster. We'll talk more about ESF support for your animal plan in the EOC in later steps in the toolkit. As I think you can already see, developing an animal disaster response plan requires the expertise of individuals and agencies who know and understand the needs of animals and their owners during a disaster. As we will discuss in future steps in the toolkit, these animal experts already exist throughout your community. They know their animals and their animal needs and the needs of your community. What they probably don't know, if your community doesn't already have a robust animal disaster plan, is how the local emergency response system works, what the local emergency operation plan looks like, how to work within an ICS system, or how your local EOC works during a disaster. Which brings us to you, the Extension Agent. The mission of Extension is to provide information and education and to encourage the application of research-based knowledge in response to local, state, and national issues affecting the community. Your mission as an Extension Agent fits precisely within your community's need for a successful and implementable animal disaster response plan. You know your community, you know where to find the animal expertise needed to develop a plan, and you have the credibility and relationships to work within your local authorities in bringing all this together in a planning and resource development effort in your community that will save both human and animal lives. So let's recap, shall we? People won't evacuate without their pets, so communities need a plan to manage pet evacuation, sheltering, and care. It often takes someone who knows both the community and animals to effectively coordinate a community's animal disaster response planning. Although there are frameworks at the federal level to support disaster response, all disasters are local, and the local authorities and the community have a responsibility for assuring that they have a local plan that includes household pets and service animals for disaster planning. Extension agents are uniquely qualified to assist their community and local emergency management in creating animal disaster preparation and planning and engaging the community to prepare for animal disaster response.